At Christmas, my Dill texted, "We're celebrating at my mom's. You stay home." That was the whole message. No sorry, no explanation, not even my name. Just an order from Brooke, my son Ethan's wife, delivered like I was some stray dog scratching at their door. I stared at those words as the Christmas lights blinked across my quiet Vermont living room. For a moment, the only thing I felt was the kind of silence that hits you right in the chest. But here's what Brooke forgot. Before my husband Henry passed, he built a $5 million family trust, and he made me the sole trustee. In case the home ever turns unkind, he had said. Tonight, it finally had, so I didn't text back. I didn't argue. I didn't ask to join their perfect little celebration at her mother's house. I opened my laptop, logged into the trust account, and with one steady breath, I hit freeze. A crisp click echoed through the room, sharp, final, almost festive in the wrong way. Brooke depended on that money for everything, but not anymore. I closed the laptop, poured myself a cup of cinnamon tea, and whispered, "Well, Merry Christmas to me." Then I booked a flight to Prague. Departure in 48 hours. No hesitation. A flash. A photo of me standing beside a silver-haired man under European winter lights, his face half-turned, my smile unmistakably peaceful. When Brooke saw that picture, it was already too late. Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me tell you what happened next. My house in Vermont had always been my anchor. A white wooden cottage standing for nearly 40 years, settled between pines that bowed under fresh snow. Every December, the place carried the same familiar things: the scent of cinnamon simmering from the kitchen, the soft thump of the wool rug Henry, my late husband, bought on our 20th anniversary, and the warm gold glow from the old string lights he refused to replace. That night, the lights flickered gently across the living room, catching on the ornaments I'd kept even after Ethan, my son, grew up and left for college. Most of them were handmade. Paper snowflakes, lopsided stars, a wooden angel he carved when he was 9. I brushed a fingertip against that angel as if touching a memory. Christmas used to mean belonging. But the house felt bigger now, emptier, like the walls could hear things I couldn't admit out loud. I picked up my phone, staring at the text Brooke, my daughter-in-law, sent earlier. "We're celebrating at my mom's. You stay home." Not even a question mark. Not even my name. I tried not to read it again, but the words sat there like a bruise that wouldn't fade. For a long minute, I stood perfectly still in the center of my living room, watching snow drift past the window. The quiet pressed against my ribs. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you, only reminds you that no one is coming. I tried to shake it off. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a new cup of cinnamon tea, letting the steam fog the air. Maybe Brooke sent the message quickly. Maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded. Maybe. But then my mind replayed the last few months, the small signs I tried to ignore. Brooke taking over every family decision. Brooke answering my questions before Ethan, my son, could speak. Brooke deciding holiday schedules, kids' activities, even which weekend was best for me to visit. Always polite, always smiling, but always the one steering the ship, while I stood on the shore. I took a breath, lifted my phone, and called her. She answered with a clipped, "Yes?" "Brooke," I said as gently as I could, "I can bring the pecan pie early. What time should I come over?" There was a pause, a long one. Then her voice, thin and cold, "It'll be easier without extra seats." Extra seats, like I was clutter. "I see," I whispered. She didn't ask if I was all right. She didn't explain. She didn't even pretend. She simply ended the call with a quick, "Merry Christmas," the kind people say to strangers they won't think about again. I stared at the phone, the echo of her tone hanging in the kitchen. For a moment, my hand trembled, not from anger, just from the sting of being dismissed so completely by the woman married to my son. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. "Ethan." "Mom?" he said. His voice carried that soft hesitation he'd had since childhood, the same tone he used when he knew he'd disappointed someone. I heard Brooke talk to you. It's all right, I said quickly, not wanting him to feel caught in the middle. I should have called sooner, he murmured. Things have been hectic. He didn't say more. I could hear the background noise behind him, the kids laughing, Vivian's voice, Brooke's mother giving instructions, the clinking of dishes being set for dinner, a full house, a warm house, a house with a place for everyone except me. Mom, Ethan said, lowering his voice, I know Brooke can be particular. She's stressed, and money's been tight. We're handling some bills, and I cut in softly. I'm fine, sweetheart. But I'm fine, I repeated, even though my chest felt like it was folding in on itself. Go enjoy Christmas Eve. Tell the kids I love them. He exhaled, guilty and grateful. I love you, Mom. I know, I said. And then the call ended. The silence afterward felt heavier than before. On the coffee table sat two small presents I had wrapped earlier. One for my granddaughter, Lily, who loved anything lavender-colored, and one for my grandson, Jonah, who collected model trains. I traced the shiny bow on Jonah's gift, realizing I had wrapped them out of habit like muscle memory, as if I still believed I'd be there to hand them over. I placed the gifts gently inside a drawer, not out of spite, out of understanding. Some doors close without slamming. Across the room, on a high shelf near the fireplace, rested the old leather travel journal Henry kept during our years together. It hadn't been opened in years. Dust clung to its spine. I reached for it. When I opened the first page, a small silver compass fell out, the one Henry bought during a trip to Nova Scotia. The metal was cool against my palm. His handwriting filled the first page. When you feel forgotten, go see the world we didn't finish seeing. The sentence struck something in me, something buried deep under years of routine and quiet acceptance. I held the compass up to the light. It caught the glow of the Christmas tree, scattering reflections across the ceiling. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel stuck. I felt pulled, as if Henry were nudging me forward from somewhere unseen. My throat tightened. The tears came quietly, no dramatic sobs, no shaking shoulders, just a soft, warm stream that blurred the ink on the page. I hadn't cried for a long time, not even at the funeral. I'd stayed strong for Ethan, for the grandkids, for myself. But tonight, standing in a house filled with memories and empty chairs, the fullness of being forgotten finally broke through. I sank onto the couch, letting the journal rest open beside me. Maybe, I whispered into the quiet room, I shouldn't stay home at all. And someone else might have meant it as a figure of speech, but I felt something shift, subtle, but unmistakably real. The kind of shift that precedes a decision, a turning point wrapped in silence. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the compass in my palm pointed somewhere I hadn't looked in years, a place past loneliness, a place waiting for me. Vivian's house glowed like a Christmas card, warm lights, perfect garlands, polished wood floors, reflecting every shimmer of the season. The kind of place where not a single ribbon tilted out of place, and every dessert looked like it belonged in a magazine. Vivian, Brooke's mother, took pride in that perfection. She breathed it. Guests filled the living room, sipping mulled wine while carols played softly in the background. The whole scene felt curated, as if even joy had to follow a script. Brooke stood near the kitchen doorway, smoothing her hair, trying to look composed, but anyone who knew her well could see the tension around her eyes. Vivian hovered beside her, adjusting ornaments on a tiered tray that didn't need adjusting. You should have seen the pie Clara made last year, Vivian said casually, as if commenting on the weather. Golden crust, perfect layers. That woman just has natural talent. Brooke's smile wavered. Mom, and her wreaths, Vivian continued. She decorates better than half the shops in this town. Brooke's jaw tightened. A quiet flush crawled up her neck. Vivian wasn't trying to be cruel. She rarely was. But her brand of praise came with a sting, and Brooke had been catching those stings since childhood. Vivian gave her daughter a quick glance. "I'm just saying, some people make things look effortless." Brooke turned away, pretending to check on the cinnamon rolls in the oven. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the door. The heat flushed her cheeks, but it wasn't from the oven. She could hear her mother's words circling in her head like tiny blades. Effortless, perfect, better. The comparisons had followed her for years, first to neighbors, then to classmates, now to me. Vivian leaned in closer. "Why didn't Clara come tonight? I assumed she'd want to see the kids." Brooke straightened, forcing her expression into something steady. "Clara said she prefers to stay home. She likes being alone. Don't bother her." It rolled off her tongue more easily than she expected, a lie polished by insecurity. Vivian lifted an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yes," Brooke said quickly. "She said she didn't want to be around too many people." It should have stopped there. But a cousin overheard, then an aunt, then someone else asked, "Is Clara upset?" Brooke replied, No, she just doesn't like big holidays." Another lie, another layer. Soon the story picked up its own momentum. I became the quiet one, the difficult one, the woman who didn't care about family gatherings. And Brooke let it happen, not out of malice, but because it shielded her from feeling small beside me. Across the room, Ethan, my son, stood with a plate of appetizers, listening as someone repeated Brooke's line, "Clara said she prefers to stay home." He froze. His eyes shifted slightly, the way they always did when something didn't sit right with him. But he didn't correct it. He didn't ask questions. Ethan had always avoided conflict, and Brooke knew how to lean into that softness. He simply nodded, murmured something polite, and swallowed whatever doubt he had. In the corner, the family group chat lit up on several phones. A cousin typed, "If Clara didn't want to come, that's on her." Another replied, "Brooke always tries so hard. Clara should appreciate her." Someone else added a laughing emoji. A few messages were sharper, a few comments woven with judgment. Nothing overtly cruel, just enough to stain. No one noticed that Nora, my best friend for 30 years, had been invited by a distant cousin who liked her company. She wasn't close enough to intervene, but close enough to hear the whispers. Her face tightened as she watched the conversation spread. She quietly took screenshots, something she wouldn't show me until later when everything unraveled. Back in the kitchen, Brooke rinsed a bowl, her movements unsteady. Vivian stepped beside her, lowering her voice. "You still haven't told Clara about the mortgage delay?" Brooke stiffened, fingers tightening around the dish towel. "Mom, please." "She has a right to know," Vivian insisted. "Henry left her as trustee. If the bank is calling and the payments are late, this affects her, too." Brooke turned sharply, keeping her voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "I don't want her thinking we can't manage our own life." Vivian's expression softened, just barely. "Then you should have told her before the holidays. She's not the type to judge." Brooke exhaled, shaky and short. "You don't understand. Henry trusted her with that $5 million fund. She already helps us enough. If she finds out Ethan lost that contract, if she finds out we're behind on the mortgage, she'll feel responsible, and I don't want that. Responsible, or disappointed, or quietly concerned. Brooke couldn't decide which terrified her more. She wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "I'm trying, Mom. I'm trying to run this house, keep things steady, keep Ethan calm, and every time Clara walks into a room, people look at her like she has all the answers, and I'm still trying to catch up." Vivian's face softened in a way only mothers can manage. She reached for Brooke's arm. "You've always felt the need to prove yourself." "Because I've always been compared," Brooke said quietly. "First to others, now to her." Vivian didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She simply squeezed Brooke's hand, a small, silent acknowledgement of wounds she helped create. Across the room, someone pointed a phone to record the decorations, capturing a perfect sweeping shot of Vivian's living room. The camera accidentally caught a moment between Brooke and Vivian, their tense posture, the whispered exchange, the pressure simmering beneath the surface. It would remain saved on that person's phone. Later, it would matter. Much later. The kids ran through the living room, laughing as they dodged adults. Brooke caught Lily, her daughter, and smoothed her dress. Careful, sweetheart. She managed a smile for her children. But inside, she felt like she was holding 100 fragile pieces together. Finances she couldn't fix, a husband whose job loss she hid from, a mother she couldn't please, and the shadow of a mother-in-law she didn't know how to stop comparing herself to. As guests clinked glasses and carols swelled, Brooke looked around the room and felt a familiar ache, a blend of fear, pride, and exhaustion. She didn't hate me. She felt threatened by the space I took up simply by existing, and so she lied. Because the truth felt sharper than silence, because being vulnerable felt worse than being dishonest, because she believed that if she admitted one crack, everything else might shatter. At that same moment, miles away in Vermont, I was packing a small suitcase, folding sweaters with hands that trembled not from fear, but from the quiet beginning of freedom. I didn't know any of what was happening at Vivian's house, but I knew this. Staying home had never felt less like home, and the world Henry wanted me to see was calling. I climbed the narrow staircase to the attic, the wooden steps creaking the way they always had. The air up there carried the faint scent of cedar and old winters, and for a moment it felt like time slowed down. My valise sat tucked beneath a quilt Henry's aunt had sewn decades ago, a small brown suitcase with worn brass latches and a leather handle shaped by years of use. I pulled it out gently. Dust rose in a soft cloud, drifting through the warm lamplight. When I opened the case, a familiar glimmer caught my eye. Henry's silver compass lay in the corner, right where I'd last packed it away after our final trip together. The metal reflected a thin beam of light onto my palm. I remembered the night he gave it to me. We had been standing on a pier in Maine, the ocean black and endless behind us. He'd pressed the compass into my hand and whispered, "Wherever you go, I'll be with you." The words echoed now, quiet but steady, as if they'd waited for this exact moment. I held the compass close and felt something inside me unclench. Maybe grief, maybe longing, maybe courage. I wasn't sure, but I felt it. I carried the valise downstairs and placed it on my bed. As it opened, it felt less like packing and more like unfolding a new chapter, one I didn't know I'd been waiting for. My hands moved slowly at first, touching sweaters, scarves, and warm socks, like they were pieces of a life I was finally ready to step out of. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim room, lighting the frost-covered window beside me. I typed, "Christmas tours for seniors." Dozens of options appeared. Group trips, river cruises, holiday markets across Europe. I scrolled until one itinerary made my breath catch. Prague, Budapest, Vienna, Zurich. 4 cities. Henry and I always said we'd see together someday. Someday had become a word that never arrived. Until now. I clicked the details. Pictures of old bridges, winter squares, glowing markets, and cobblestone streets filled the screen. Each image tugged gently at something deep in my chest. My right hand trembled slightly as it hovered over the button. Book now. I could almost hear the house holding its breath, as if waiting to see who I'd choose to be. I pressed the button. Click. The sound was crisp, final and strangely liberating, like the first step on solid ground after months of sinking sand. The confirmation email appeared instantly. Departure, 48 hours. I exhaled long and slow. For the first time in years, the quiet around me didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space, like possibility. Just as I began to close the laptop, my phone buzzed. Nora, my best friend for 30 years, was calling on FaceTime. Her face filled the screen, framed by twinkling lights and a half-decorated tree behind her. "Claire?" she said, squinting. "You look pale. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Don't lie to me," she replied, lifting a brow. "What happened?" I hesitated. The truth rose in my throat, hot and heavy, but I wasn't ready to speak it. Not yet. "I'm just tired." Nora wasn't convinced. "Did Ethan and Brooke say something?" "No," I whispered, though my chest tightened. "I'm okay." She sighed, leaning closer to her screen. "You've spent years carrying everyone else. Maybe it's time to stop. Don't keep hurting yourself just because you're kind." Her words hit harder than she knew. I looked away, blinking quickly. "I'll be fine, Nora, really." She studied me for a long moment, then her voice softened. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." "Thank you," I said quietly. When the call ended, the silence in the room felt different. Not heavy, not sharp, just honest. I placed the phone down and got to work. I folded warm layers into the valise: wool sweaters, thermal leggings, scarves. Henry used to tease me about because they were big enough to hide in. I added gloves, a thick coat, a knitted hat Lily made last winter, and a pair of boots still carrying a bit of Vermont mud on the soles. Then I slipped Henry's travel journal into the side pocket. The leather cover felt soft and familiar beneath my fingertips. I placed the silver compass beside it. Seeing them together made my throat tighten again. But this time, the feeling wasn't sadness. It was strength. Something inside me straightened, like a tree finding its roots again after a storm. Downstairs, the laptop still rested on the table, the trust account dashboard faintly lit. The freeze order I'd placed earlier sat there like a closed door, cool, calm, non-negotiable. I looked at it one last time, not as revenge, not as punishment, but as a boundary, a reset, a quiet line drawn to protect what Henry entrusted to me. I closed the laptop with a soft click. The house felt lighter, my breathing felt clearer, and for the first time in a long while I felt like myself. Not someone's afterthought, not someone's burden, not someone's extra seat. Just me. I zipped the valise shut, the sound echoing through the room like a promise. Tomorrow I would head to the airport. Tomorrow I would step into a world I'd been too afraid to face alone. Tomorrow, the journey Henry wanted me to take would finally begin. I placed the compass on top of the valise. Its silver surface glinted under the warm glow of the lamp. Quiet determination settled into my bones, steady, sure, unshakable. I was no longer waiting for someone to make room for me. I was claiming a world of my own. The Burlington airport was already humming when I arrived, the kind of soft holiday chaos that made every corner feel alive. Families clustered around luggage carts, parents juggling cocoa cups and boarding passes, grandparents hugging grandkids so tight their glasses fogged. Everywhere I looked, people were wrapped in warmth, laughing, rushing, holding on to one another. And there I was, rolling my small valise across the glossy floor, alone but surprisingly steady. Something in me felt lighter, as if each step toward the gate loosened one more knot I'd carried for years. A little girl wearing reindeer pajamas ran past me, shrieking with joy as her father chased her. She leapt into her grandmother's arms, the woman lifting her effortlessly. I paused, watching that moment, the joy, the belonging, and let the ache bloom quietly before I breathed it out. Some scenes weren't meant for me anymore, and that was all right. I found an empty seat near the window and settled in. Snow flurries danced outside, swirling under the floodlights. The sight made me smile. Snow had always reminded me of beginnings, not endings. As I pulled Henry's silver compass from my coat pocket to steady myself, a shadow leaned closer. "Excuse me," a warm voice said. "Is anyone sitting here?" I looked up. A tall man in his early 70s stood beside me, carrying a navy blue duffel bag. His silver hair was neatly combed, his coat tailored but worn at the edges, and he wore a simple wedding band, its gold dulled by time. "No," I replied, smiling gently. Please. He sat down with a thoughtful exhale, placing his bag at his feet. A moment later, his eyes drifted to my hands and the compass glinting in my palm. Something in his expression tightened, just for a heartbeat. You okay? I asked softly. He blinked, then cleared his throat. Oh, yes, sorry. That compass just looks familiar. I turned it over in my hand. It belonged to my husband, Henry. The man nodded slowly. A lot of Navy men used to carry ones like that. I didn't think much of it. Vermont had plenty of veterans, but his tone carried a brief, quiet weight, as if the memory tugged at him unexpectedly. Before I could ask, boarding began. People stood gathering their bags, calling to each other. The man rose and offered me his hand. Adrian Cole, he said with a small smile. Traveling alone? Clara Merritt, I replied. And yes, for the first time in a long while. Well, Clara, Adrian said, lifting my valise with an easy strength. Let's make sure we both get to Europe in one piece. There was a lightness to his voice, calm, respectful, a bit playful, that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. On the plane, he helped slide my suitcase into the overhead bin, then settled into the seat beside mine. The cabin glowed with Christmas lights strung along the ceiling, a small gesture from the airline. First time escaping Christmas? Adrian asked once we were buckled in. His joke slipped out so gently that I didn't expect the laugh that escaped me. A real laugh. Soft, unguarded, the kind I hadn't heard from myself since before Henry passed. Something like that, I replied. You? He rested his elbows lightly on the armrests. My first Christmas without my wife. We used to travel this time of year. After she passed, I promised myself I'd still go, just slower. I nodded, understanding more than he realized. I'm sorry. He gave a small smile. Thank you. The plane began to taxi, engines humming beneath our feet. The runway lights stretched ahead like a path drawn across the earth. To new beginnings, Adrian said quietly as the wheels lifted from the ground. I glanced at him, meeting his calm, steady eyes. Something inside me warmed. I raised my cup of water in a small toast. To new beginnings. The clouds swallowed us, soft and bright. For a while we sat in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling, the kind that felt like being in the presence of someone who understood something about the world that most people overlooked. A few hours into the flight, Adrian glanced toward the compass resting on my tray. You and Henry traveled a lot? He asked gently. Not as much as we meant to, I said. Life got busy. Responsibilities stacked up. We always told ourselves we'd take a long trip someday. And now you're doing it, he said. That's brave. I smiled sadly. It's overdue. He looked down at his hands, rubbing his thumb over his wedding band. My wife always said the world doesn't wait for anyone. I learned that the hard way. There was a quiet sorrow in his voice, something that hinted at regret. But before I could ask anything, he shifted the subject, softly, deliberately. So, 4 cities in one tour. You're ambitious. I had help, I said, nodding toward the travel journal tucked into my seat pocket. My husband left me a list. I'm just following it. He nodded thoughtfully. That's a good way to honor him. When I spoke about Henry, his laugh, his love of history, the way he always got us lost on purpose to find better views, Adrian's expression shifted again. Barely. A micro flinch. The kind someone makes when hearing a name that touches an old memory. His gaze dropped for a second. His breath hitched just slightly, but then he offered a gentle smile. He sounds like a good man. He was, I whispered. A flight attendant passed, offering blankets. Adrian took 2, one for himself, one he placed gently across my lap. You'll get cold, he said. It was such a simple gesture, but it landed in a place inside me I'd forgotten was there. A place that longed to be cared for, even in small ways. Thank you, I murmured. Anytime, he replied, meeting my eyes. The cabin lights dimmed, settling the passengers into an easy dusk. Outside the window, the moon hung low, brushing the clouds with silver. Warm beneath the blanket, I felt my eyelids grow heavy. Sleep came gently, soft, floating, peaceful. Just before I drifted off, I felt Adrian adjust the edge of the blanket so it wouldn't slide off my shoulder. And in that moment, even half asleep, I felt something bloom quietly inside me. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. For the first time since Henry died, I felt seen. Not as a burden, not as an extra seat, but as someone worth noticing. When I opened my eyes again, the sky outside had begun to lighten. The cabin whispered with the rustle of travelers waking. And far below us, the old city of Prague waited, its rooftops dusted in winter gold, welcoming strangers with stories ready to unfold. Prague greeted us like a painting brought to life. Golden lights spilled across narrow cobblestone streets, and the winter air carried the scent of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon from the Christmas market scattered across Old Town. Snow dusted the rooftops like powdered sugar, softening every edge until the city looked like it had been waiting centuries for December to return. Adrian and I stepped off the tour bus into the heart of the Old Town square. Bells chimed from the astronomical clock tower, each note rolling through the icy air like a reminder that time could still hold beauty. The crowd moved around us in warm clusters, locals bundled in wool coats, travelers clutching maps, children tugging mittens off to reach for pastries. "This place," I whispered, taking it all in. "It feels like stepping inside a storybook." Adrian smiled, his breath a soft cloud in the cold. "Prague has that effect on people." We wandered through the Christmas market with our tour group, weaving among stalls lined with gingerbread hearts, hand-carved ornaments, and tiny wooden toys painted in bright colors. A vendor handed me a cup of hot-spiced wine, the steam warming my face. I took a sip, and the heat bloomed inside my chest. "You like it?" Adrian asked. "It tastes like Christmas should feel," I said. He laughed, quiet, warm, and something inside me loosened. I tried a thin, crisp Christmas wafer from another stall, sprinkled with nuts and honey. Adrian nudged me lightly. "Careful, those are addicting." I nudged him back with a faint smile. "I'll take my chances." We walked with the group toward the Charles Bridge, its ancient stone arches rising ahead of us like an invitation from another century. Snow clung to the statues lining the walkway, saints, kings, forgotten heroes, watching silently as the world kept moving around them. When we stepped onto the bridge, the Vltava River stretched beneath us, dark and calm, carrying the reflections of lanterns that glowed along the banks. Adrian stopped beside me near one of the statues, hands tucked in his coat pockets. His voice softened as he looked up at the lamps lighting the bridge. "Your husband, Henry?" he said gently. "He would have loved this bridge. Men like him always noticed beauty. Others missed." My breath caught. Something about the certainty in his tone tugged at me. "You talk like you knew him." Adrian paused. Just a beat too long. Then he offered a small, gentle smile. "Just intuition." I nodded, letting the moment pass even though a faint question stirred inside me. We continued walking, letting the quiet settle. The snow fell in slow, deliberate flakes, almost as if the sky wanted us to notice each one. For a long stretch of the bridge, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence felt full, not empty. Warm, not cold. Maybe this is what healing sounds like, I thought. Not words, not explanations, just presence. As we reached the center of the bridge, my phone buzzed, a message from Ethan, my son. "Mom, are you home?" For years, I would have replied instantly. I would have softened my tone, reassured him, protected him from the truth of how lonely I was. But tonight, with Prague's golden lights flickering across the water, something inside me shifted. I lifted my phone and snapped a picture of the bridge. The lanterns, the snow, the faint silhouette of the castle in the distance. I sent it with a simple message: Merry Christmas from Prague. No explanation, no apology, just truth. When I hit send, cold air brushed my cheeks, but the warmth inside me didn't fade. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't waiting to be included. I had chosen myself. Ethan didn't reply. Not then. But I knew he saw it. And somewhere in a warm house miles away, Brooke, my daughter-in-law, felt the shock ripple through her before she smoothed her face and pretended nothing was wrong. Adrian noticed the look on my face as I lowered the phone. Everything okay? Yes, I said. And for the first time in a long time, it was true. We kept walking with the group, eventually stopping near a quiet overlook where the river curved away from the city. Lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, their light stretching across the snow in soft gold ribbons. Adrian rested his hand on the railing. My wife loved places like this, he said softly. Crowds, lights, winter markets. She used to drag me to every one of them. What was she like? I asked. He smiled at the memory, eyes lowered. Kind, too kind. She forgave everyone too easily, especially me. There was a sadness in his voice, but also a deep affection. I'm sorry for your loss, I said gently. He looked at me with a gratitude that didn't need words. Thank you. And Henry, what was he like? Steady, I said. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke. He made the world feel safe. Adrian's expression shifted again, barely a flicker, but enough for me to notice. A soft tightening around his eyes, a silence that seemed to stretch. But he recovered quickly, offering me a small nod. He sounds like someone worth missing. He is, I whispered. The tour guide called for us to gather. As we followed the group back toward Old Town, a pair of drunken tourists stumbled past, one bumping into me. Adrian stepped forward instinctively, placing his arm gently in front of me like a shield. You're all right, he said as the men laughed their way down the bridge. The gesture shouldn't have meant much, but it did, more than I expected. Later that night, our group settled into a small local restaurant with wooden beams, warm lamps, and a band playing soft Czech carols. My cheeks were still flushed from the cold, my hair carrying tiny melted flakes of snow. Adrian sat across from me, his eyes reflecting the glow of the candles on the table. When the waiter brought 2 glasses of mulled wine, Adrian lifted his. To second chances. I hesitated only a moment before raising mine. To second chances. We clinked glasses lightly. The bells outside chimed again, soft, distant, full of wonder. I felt something open inside me, something gentle, something hopeful. Maybe the world isn't done with you yet. The thought came unbidden, but it wrapped around me like a scarf against the cold. And as the night deepened and the city outside shimmered beneath its blanket of snow, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I was coming back to life. Budapest shimmered like a jeweled river that night. The Danube glowed beneath strings of warm lights, and trams clattered softly across the bridges as if the whole city was humming a Christmas lullaby. From the balcony of my hotel room, I could see Buda Castle rising in the distance, its towers washed in gold. Couples strolled along the riverwalk, their laughter drifting upward through the cold air. But inside my room, the only light came from a single lamp and the soft blue glow of my phone vibrating on the table. A message from Nora, my best friend for 30 years. Clara, you need to see this. I'm sorry. My breath caught. Nora didn't send messages like that unless she had no choice. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the link. A video loaded, TikTok style, shaky, recorded by someone at the Christmas party in Vivian's house. Families laughing, clinking glasses, music playing. Then the camera drifted toward the kitchen where Vivian, my daughter-in-law Brooke's mother, stood with a glass of wine. Brooke was beside her. A few cousins hovered near the counter. My chest tightened as the audio sharpened. Vivian's voice rang out, Clara likes being alone. Don't bother her." A few people chuckled. Another voice, maybe an aunt, added, "She's too much sometimes." Brooke gave a tight laugh. "Clara always makes everything dramatic." The words landed like cold stones in my stomach. The video panned almost carelessly toward a corner of the room. Ethan, my son, was there, standing with a plate of food staring at the floor, silent, not correcting them, not stepping forward, not defending me, just existing in that space where my name was tossed around like a joke. My throat tightened. The camera turned back to Vivian. "Honestly, Brooke has been more of a daughter to us than Clara ever wanted to be to her own family." More laughter. The kind you hear when people think they're being kind, but the cruelty sits just under the surface. I pressed pause. The room went still, completely still. Outside, church bells began to ring, soft, distant chimes drifting across the Danube, a wake-up call wrapped in sound. I sat slowly on the edge of the hotel bed. The screen's light reflected onto my face, mixing with the glow of the Budapest skyline beyond the window. My reflection hovered faintly in the glass, an older woman alone in a foreign city on Christmas night, watching people she loved treat her like an inconvenience. But instead of collapsing, something surprising happened. A strange calm slid over me, quiet and steady. I watched the video again, this time without flinching, without expecting anything different, without hoping anyone would correct the narrative. When the recording ended, I exhaled and whispered to the empty room, "So, that's how little I mattered to them." No tears, just truth. Sharp, clean, and oddly freeing. My phone buzzed again, another message. "Brooke, why are you in Europe?" I stared at it for a moment. Then I turned the screen face down on the table without replying. The knock on the door made me lift my head. "Clara?" Adrian's voice, gentle, low, came from the hallway. I wiped my palms on my sweater and opened the door. Adrian stood there, still wearing his coat, his silver hair slightly tousled from the wind outside. Behind him, the hallway window framed the lights of Budapest like a living postcard. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm learning," I said. It was the only answer I had, and the only one that felt true. He nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what that meant. "May I?" he asked, motioning toward the room. I stepped aside. He walked in and glanced at the phone lying face down. I didn't need to explain. I simply handed it to him. He watched the video silently, standing near the window while the lights of the city flickered across his face. When it ended, he held the phone for a long moment before setting it gently on the table. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "not for them, but to me." "I'm not," I replied, "not anymore." He looked at me, really looked, and I saw something familiar in his eyes, a memory of being misunderstood, pushed aside, judged quietly by people who should have known better. "My wife went through something similar," he said quietly. "Her family thought she was too soft, too sentimental. They didn't see her strength until it was too late." I swallowed. "And you?" "I loved her for those very things," he said. "People like her, like you, see the world differently. That scares people sometimes." I sank onto the small couch by the window, pulling my knees close. I spent years trying to fit into a space they kept shrinking. Adrian sat beside me, close enough to offer support, far enough to respect my quiet. "You don't have to keep shrinking." We both looked out the window then. Lights from the chain bridge shimmered on the river, long gold strokes stretching across the dark water. The bells in the distance rang again, echoing through the city like a gentle insistence. After a few minutes, Adrian spoke. "Do you want to go for a walk? Fresh air helps." I shook my head. "Not tonight." He nodded, accepting my boundary without question. "Then I'll stay a moment, just in case you want company." We sat together in silence. No rushing, no questions, just presence. The kind of comfort that doesn't try to fix anything. The kind that simply says, "You're not alone in this moment." When he finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Clara? Yes? You deserved better than what was in that video." I met his eyes. "I know." And I did. And for the first time, I truly did. When the door closed behind him, I leaned back and inhaled deeply. The city lights flickered softly against the hotel walls. My tears had dried, leaving only a quiet resolve. I wasn't going to chase anyone anymore. Not love, not approval, not family. From this point forward, I was choosing my own way. The video moved through the family group chats like a spark catching dry leaves. By the time morning sunlight touched the snowy rooftops of Vermont, nearly everyone connected to Vivian's household had seen it. A cousin sent it to another cousin, an aunt shared it with a neighbor, and eventually it circled back to Nora, who confronted Ethan in the simplest, bluntest way possible. "You need to watch this." Ethan, my son, stood in the kitchen holding his coffee when the clip ended. The mug shook slightly in his hand. Behind him, the Merritt house glowed with Christmas lights, each bulb flickering uneasily, casting an uneven pattern across the walls, a reminder that even festive lights can reveal cracks. Brooke walked into the kitchen still in her robe, hair messy from sleep but her expression tight. "Morning," she murmured. Ethan didn't answer. She blinked, sensing the shift. "What's wrong?" He turned toward her slowly, phone still in his hand. "Why did you say my mother wanted to stay home?" Brooke froze. "What?" "Don't." Ethan's voice wasn't loud, but it had a firmness she wasn't used to. "The whole family heard you at the party. Nora sent me the video. You told everyone my mother likes being alone. You said she didn't want to come." Brooke's eyes darted left, then right, searching for a place to set the moment down. "Ethan, you're blowing this out of proportion." "No," he said, stepping closer. "I'm asking you a simple question. Why did you say that?" Brooke folded her arms. "Because..." Her voice shook. "Because I can't handle your mom and my mom judging me in one room." The words exploded out of her, sharp and exhausted. Ethan stared at her as if she'd spoken another language. "So you lied? To everyone? To me?" "I didn't lie," she insisted, voice cracking. I managed the situation." "Managed," Ethan repeated. "You told people my mother didn't want to come. You made her look like she wasn't part of this family. Why?" Brooke's composure buckled. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes as her voice turned jagged. "Because I can't keep up, Ethan. I can't. Your mom cooks better than me, decorates better than me, hosts better than me. She breathes and people praise her. My mom tells me I'm never doing enough. She compares me to everyone, and Clara is the person she compares me to the most." Her words came fast now, tumbling out like stones she couldn't hold anymore. "I wasn't enough for my mom," she whispered, voice breaking. "And I'm not enough for yours either." Ethan's expression softened for a moment, but only a moment, because insecurity, when twisted enough, becomes a knife. And Brooke picked it up. "With your mother," she continued, hurt deepening into something sharper. "Everything always revolves around her. She makes every situation about her feelings, her needs." The room went silent. A cold, hard edge formed in Ethan's posture. Something inside him snapped cleanly, not loud but final. "My mother," he said quietly, "raised me alone while your mom judged her pies." Brooke flinched as if struck. He set his coffee down with deliberate care. "You said she makes everything about herself, but she has spent her whole life making space for everyone else, including us, including you." Brooke wiped her cheek. "I was overwhelmed." "And instead of admitting that," Ethan said, voice trembling with disappointment, "you made her the problem." Vivian entered from the hallway then, adjusting her sweater. Her eyes flicked from Brooke's tear-streaked face to Ethan's set jaw. "Is everything all right?" Ethan turned toward her. "No, it's not. That video..." Vivian lifted a hand, the gesture small but firm. Brooke is stressed. The holidays are hard for her. Being stressed doesn't give her permission to lie about my mother, Ethan said. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to Vivian in that tone. Steady, unflinching. Vivian's expression tightened, but she said nothing. Her silence wasn't agreement. It was avoidance. Brooke shook her head as tears flowed freely. I didn't mean to hurt her. I didn't think she'd even see the video. That's the problem, Ethan replied. You didn't think about her at all. He grabbed his coat from the chair. Brooke stepped forward. Where are you going? For a walk. He paused, swallowing. I need air. Brooke's voice trembled. Ethan, please, don't do this right now. He shook his head. If it were just the lie, maybe we could talk. But you made me believe my mother didn't want us. You made me pull away from her. You made me lie to myself. Tears slipped down Brooke's cheeks, her face crumpling. I was scared you'd think less of me if I told the truth. I think less of you because you hid it, Ethan whispered. Brooke covered her mouth, sobbing softly, shoulders shaking. Vivian moved to her side, rubbing her back like she was a child again. Ethan stood in the doorway, coat half-zipped, breathing heavily. The Christmas lights flickered above him, their glow uneven, trembling against the ceiling, the perfect symbol of the instability creeping into their home. He took one last look at Brooke, at Vivian, at the home he shared with them. Then he stepped outside into the cold Vermont air. His breath formed white clouds as he walked down the driveway, pulling his phone from his pocket. Without thinking, he dialed my number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. He stared down at the dark screen, and for the first time, he understood the consequences of standing silent for too long. Inside the house, Brooke collapsed onto a chair, sobbing into her hands. Vivian closed the curtains, hiding the flickering lights. Outside, Ethan kept walking. Snow began to fall, covering his hair, his coat, the road beneath him, and somewhere thousands of miles away, while his world unraveled, I was stepping into a new one, discovering that healing could happen even when no one back home knew how broken things really were. Budapest wrapped itself in gold that night. Lanterns lined the riverwalk, their reflections trembling softly on the surface of the Danube. The cold air held the scent of mulled wine and roasted almonds drifting from nearby stalls, and the city hummed with the low, steady rhythm of winter evenings in Europe. Adrian and I walked side by side along the river, our steps slow, unhurried, 2 people moving through the same quiet moment without needing to fill it. We reached a stone bench under a lamp that glowed warm and gentle. Adrian brushed snow from the seat and gestured for me to sit. I did. He sat beside me, leaving just enough space for comfort but close enough to feel the warmth from his coat. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he took a breath and said, "My wife loved this place." I turned toward him. "You've been here before?" "Years ago," he said softly. "She always wanted to see the Danube at Christmas. She said the lights made the river look alive." His eyes followed the shimmer on the water. "She passed away from cancer 3 winters ago." I placed my hand gently over his. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, swallowing. "She asked me to take one last trip with her, a Christmas trip, right here. Budapest, Prague, Vienna. But I was buried in work, deadlines, meetings. I told her we could go in spring." He paused, voice thinning. Spring never came for her. The lamps cast a soft halo around him, and for a moment he looked both older and younger. Older from grief, younger from the rawness of finally saying it aloud. "Life doesn't wait," he said quietly. "I learned that too late." The honesty in his voice reached a place in me I didn't know was still tender. I thought of Henry, my husband, my steady North Star, smiling through memories we never finished making. "I understand," I said. "Henry and I had our own list, places we kept postponing." "What happened to him?" Adrian asked gently. "It was peaceful," I said. "A quiet passing. He used to joke that he wanted to leave the world the same way he lived in it. Softly." A sad smile touched my lips. But peaceful doesn't mean painless. Adrian listened with the kind of attention you rarely find. Patient, sincere, steady. It made the words easier. When I finished, he looked at me with an expression I didn't expect. Reverence. Henry was a great man, he murmured. My head lifted sharply. You knew Henry? Adrian blinked, too slowly. A flicker of surprise crossed his features, as if he'd revealed more than he meant to. Long story, he said, gaze drifting toward the river. Another time. Something about his tone held truth and avoidance tangled together, but it wasn't threatening. It felt complicated, human. I slipped my hand into my coat pocket, fingers curling around Henry's silver compass. Its cool metal steadied my breath. I wasn't afraid, just curious. Okay, I said softly. Another time. Adrian looked relieved, grateful even, that I didn't push further. We sat quietly as church bells echoed across the water, their sound rich and deep, rolling over the rooftops like a blessing. Adrian's voice softened. He helped me once. My breath caught. Henry? Adrian nodded, in a moment when I didn't deserve it. That was all he offered, but it was enough to stir something deep inside me. He turned to me fully. Clara, you carry yourself like someone used to standing alone, but you don't have to be alone all the time. For years, I'd built walls so quietly, I hadn't even noticed their height. His words slipped through a gap I didn't know was there. I felt my chest warm in a way that wasn't sadness or nostalgia, something gentler, something alive. I'm trying, I whispered. Adrian smiled, soft and sincere. I can tell. A group of tourists passed behind us, laughing as snowflakes swirled around their scarves. In that small pocket of stillness, I felt something inside me shift, not dramatically, but undeniably, like a frost melting, like a door unlocking. Adrian reached out, not to hold my hand, but to rest his palm beside mine on the bench. An invitation, not a demand. I let my hand inch closer, not touching, just near enough to feel the warmth from his skin. It was the first time in years my heart didn't feel like something I had to protect at all costs. The bells chimed again, echoing across the river. We sat there under the golden light, saying nothing, letting the night settle around us like a shared blanket. For the first time since Henry left this world, I opened a small door inside myself. Just a little. Just enough. Brooke stared at the screen of her phone like it had just delivered a death sentence. There, glowing under the soft morning light of Vermont, was the photo I had posted. Me and Adrian standing beneath a towering Christmas tree in Vienna, laughing at something the camera hadn't captured. Snow falling, warm lights glowing behind us. My smile open in a way Brooke hadn't seen in years. She zoomed in, closer, closer still, on my face, on Adrian's. On the way he leaned slightly toward me, on the way my eyes seemed alive. Brooke's breath caught. Is she with someone? Her voice cracked with a mix of confusion and panic. Ethan, still shaken from their earlier argument, looked over from the kitchen doorway, but didn't speak. Vivian entered the room in her pristine cream sweater, holding a mug of tea. She took one glance at the photo and raised an eyebrow. Well, she looks happier without you. The sentence sliced through the air like cold wind. Brooke spun toward her mother. Mom, don't, not now. Vivian just shrugged, sipping her tea. I'm only saying what I see. Clara seems to be having a lovely time in Europe. Meanwhile, your Christmas looks... She gestured vaguely at Brooke's rumpled hair and tear-stained face. More complicated. The words hit Brooke in the softest and sharpest places. Her fear, her pride, her inadequacy, everything she'd been trying to hide. Brooke grabbed her coat. I need to check something. Vivian frowned. Where are you going? To the bank, Brooke snapped, already halfway out the door. She drove like the road personally offended her, tires cutting through slush until she skidded into the parking lot of the credit union. She slammed the door behind her and rushed inside, boots squeaking across the polished floor. A startled receptionist looked up. "Ma'am, can I help?" "I need to check an account," Brooke blurted out. "The Merritt Family Trust, now." The receptionist blinked, but led her to a financial manager, a middle-aged man with rimless glasses who typed quietly at a computer. Brooke stood over him, twisting her gloves anxiously. The man frowned at the screen. "Mrs. Merritt," he said slowly, "it appears the trust has been fully frozen." Brooke blinked. "Frozen? No, that's impossible. My husband and I have access. It's our family trust." The manager cleared his throat. "The trustee has sole authority. According to the system, the action was performed yesterday evening." She leaned closer. "Frozen?" "Yes, ma'am, the full $5 million. Frozen until further instruction." Brooke staggered backward as if someone had physically shoved her. "$5." She swallowed hard. $million. Frozen?" "Yes." Her breath came fast and shallow. "There must be a mistake." "I'm afraid not. The trustee executed the order herself." Herself. Brooke's stomach dropped. Clara. Suddenly the photo on her screen, me smiling with Adrian, felt like a taunt, a warning, a threat, a woman who had finally snapped and struck back. Brooke sank into the nearest chair, head spinning. Why would she do this? Why now? The manager, sensing emotional territory far above his pay grade, said gently, "You may want to speak with her directly." Brooke barked a humorless laugh. "Oh, she's too busy taking Christmas pictures in Vienna." She stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly across the tile. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone and dialed Ethan. He answered on the second ring. "Brooke?" She didn't even let him finish. "Your mom froze our account," she cried. "All of it. She froze everything. She's ruining Christmas." Ethan stared through the windshield from where he sat in his car, engine running but unmoving. Snow drifted gently across the glass. "What are you talking about?" "She posted that picture," Brooke said, voice trembling. "She's in Europe with some man, and now the money is gone. She's doing this on purpose." Ethan closed his eyes, leaning his head back. Mom wouldn't freeze the trust out of spite. Brooke's voice cracked. Then why did she do it? Why now? Why when she knows we're all ready? She stopped herself, but the slip was enough. Ethan's eyes snapped open. "Already what?" Brooke rubbed her forehead, panicking. "I didn't mean—" "Ethan, please, just listen. We need that money, the mortgage, the tuition, the bills. Everything depends on it." Ethan felt something twist inside his chest. "Maybe she froze it to protect it," he said quietly. "Not to punish you." Brooke stared at the bank entrance as if the glass doors might offer an explanation. "No, she's showing me she can take everything away if she wants to." Ethan shook his head. "She doesn't think that way." "She froze the account," Brooke whispered. "That's exactly how she thinks." He exhaled slowly, fogging up the inside of the car. "Brooke, what did you expect would happen? She spent Christmas alone because of your lie." Brooke stiffened. "That had nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this," Ethan said, voice thick with exhaustion. "She's finally standing up for herself." Brooke blinked, stunned. "You're taking her side?" "I'm not taking sides," Ethan said. "I'm realizing I've been on the wrong one." The silence was sharp. Brooke swallowed hard, a sob breaking through. "Ethan." "I was scared." His anger faltered. "Of what?" "Of not being enough," she whispered. "For you, for my mom, for your mom. I'm scared of losing everything." He softened, but only slightly. "Lying didn't protect anything. It just broke more." Brooke pressed her forehead against the cold glass door of the bank, body shaking. "What do we do?" "I'll call Mom," Ethan said, starting the car. But when he dialed my number, it rang and rang before going to voicemail. He tried again, and again, and again. Each unanswered call deepened the truth, sinking into both of their hearts. For the first time, I was unreachable. Not because I was hurt, but because I had finally stopped shrinking myself for anyone. Across the ocean, while Brooke spiraled and Ethan tried to steady himself, Vienna's winter lights glowed against my hotel window. I was living, and they were just now realizing what that meant. Vienna unfolded like a dream you don't want to wake from. Horse-drawn carriages rolling over cobblestones, gilded buildings glowing under a pale winter sun, and the distant sound of violins drifting from some open doorway. Our tour group moved through the city in slow wonder, but Adrian walked beside me with a quiet tension in his shoulders, as if carrying something that weighed more than his small leather satchel. By late afternoon, snow began to fall, soft flakes catching the light like tiny stars. Adrian touched my elbow gently. "There's a cafe around the corner," he said. "One of the oldest in Vienna. Would you join me?" There was something earnest in his tone, something that felt like the beginning of a confession. I nodded. We stepped into a warm, amber-lit cafe with dark wood walls, velvet seating, and candles flickering on every table. A pianist played something soft in the corner, and the scent of chocolate and roasted coffee beans wrapped around us like an embrace. Adrian chose a small table by the window. Outside, snow swirled around the lampposts, settling like lace on the panes. For a while, we sat in silence. He stirred his coffee, not drinking it. His hands trembled slightly. I waited. Finally, he exhaled. "Clara." His voice barely carried over the music. "There's something I didn't tell you earlier, something I should have said the moment I saw the compass." I felt my spine straighten. "All right." He looked up, eyes weighted with a mixture of sadness and truth. I knew Henry. The world seemed to pause. Even the pianist's melody felt distant. "You knew him?" My voice sounded small, uncertain. Adrian nodded slowly. "Yes, I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want you to think I approached you because of it. But I knew him a long time ago." My fingers instinctively reached for the silver compass in my coat pocket. Its metal felt cold, grounding. "How?" Adrian leaned back, eyes drifting toward the window as he gathered the memories. "I served with him for a stretch. We were in the Navy together. There was an accident. An engine failure in one of the smaller cabins. I was inside. It caught fire faster than anyone expected." He paused, voice tight. "Most people ran the other way. Henry ran toward it." My breath caught. "He pulled me out," Adrian continued, "carried me half-conscious onto the deck. If he hadn't come when he did, I wouldn't be here." I pressed a hand over my mouth. "We became friends after that," he said softly. "Close ones. Wrote letters for a few years. And then life moved on, as it tends to do." I closed my eyes briefly, seeing Henry in my mind, not the older man I buried, but the young man who once believed he could save the whole world with his bare hands. Adrian wiped a finger under his eye, almost embarrassed by the emotion. "There's more." I met his gaze. "About 35 years ago," he said, "I saw you, just once, at a small Navy family ceremony. You were carrying Ethan. He must have been 5. Henry introduced you, but it was in passing, and you were busy with the boy tugging at your skirt." He smiled faintly. "You probably don't remember." I shook my head slowly. "I don't." "It's all right," he said gently. "It was a moment in a blur of moments, but I remembered the way Henry looked at you, like a man who had already found every answer he needed." Tears stung my eyes. Adrian took a deep breath that trembled at the end. "Before he passed, near the end, he wrote me one last time. I didn't receive the letter until months later, but in it he said..." Adrian swallowed hard, voice breaking. He said, "If she ever finds someone kind after I'm gone, let her." The warmth in the room swelled around us, thick with memory and grief, and something soft enough to feel like destiny. My tears finally spilled over, not from pain, but from the quiet miracle of it all. "He talked about you, Clara," Adrian whispered, "as if you carried more fire in you than any woman he'd ever met." I covered my face with one hand. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wanted you to get to know me for who I am," he said, "not for who I once knew." Outside, snow drifted past the window, turning Vienna into a world washed pure and bright. Inside, the candle between us flickered, casting soft gold light across the table. I let my hand fall from my face. "Henry would have wanted me to hear this." "He would have wanted you to live," Adrian replied, "not just survive." I reached into my coat and wrapped my fingers around the compass again. "It feels like he led me here," I whispered, "to this cafe, to this moment, to you." Adrian nodded, eyes full of something tender and steady. I think he did. For a long time, we didn't speak. We didn't need to, because something sacred had settled between us, an understanding deeper than chance, older than coincidence. I wasn't losing Henry. I was finding the part of him that wanted me to keep moving, to keep loving, to keep living. And sitting there across from Adrian, with Vienna snow glowing like stardust beyond the glass, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: permission. Ethan booked the flight the way someone grabs a lifeline, fast, panicked, with no time to think about prices or schedules. He stuffed a few clothes into a backpack, barely zipped it, and sped through the snowy Vermont night toward the airport. Each mile he drove, guilt pressed deeper into his chest. At the gate, he kept checking his phone, scrolling through old messages from me, short, gentle notes I'd sent over the past year. "Let me know if you need anything. How are the kids? Did Brooke like the pie? I'm proud of you." He read them again and again, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. People around him boarded calmly, but Ethan felt like he was falling, like the ground beneath him had been pulled away the moment he realized how carelessly he'd believed Brooke's version of events. On the plane, he stared out the window at the dark, starless sky. A flight attendant asked if he wanted water. He shook his head. He barely heard her voice. His thoughts were with me, his mother, somewhere across the ocean, finally choosing herself after years of choosing everyone else. By the time the plane landed in Vienna, the city was wrapped in soft morning light. The arrivals hall glowed with warm yellow bulbs strung across the ceilings, and holiday wreaths lined the walls. Ethan hurried past them, his backpack slung over one shoulder, breath uneven. He dialed my number for what felt like the 100th time. "This time," I answered. "Mom," he choked out. There was a pause, long enough for him to fear I'd hang up. Then my voice came through, steady and unmistakably calm. "Ethan, I'm safe. I'm living." He closed his eyes, relief and heartbreak colliding inside him. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have—" "We'll talk when you see me," I said. Not harsh, not warm, just true. He understood. There were things apologies couldn't fix over the phone. He rushed out of the airport into the cold Vienna air. Snow drifted lightly, melting on his coat. He checked the map on his phone with shaking hands, trying to find Stephensplatz. Street signs blurred as he ran through the city, passing pastry shops opening their doors, carriages clattering along cobblestones, and tourists snapping morning photos under Christmas lights. He crossed the first square, then the second, breath-forming white clouds as he pushed through the cold. Every step felt like he was running towards something he'd forgotten he needed, toward the woman who had carried him, fed him, fought for him, quietly loved him without asking for anything back. He turned a corner and the snow began falling harder, soft flakes swirling through the air. And then he saw me. I stood under a lamppost, snow settling on my coat, the city glowing behind me. My face was brighter than he remembered, lighter, almost illuminated from within. Adrian stood beside me, hands tucked into his pockets, giving me a small smile before glancing up and noticing Ethan. Adrian stepped aside without a word. Ethan froze several paces away. His eyes widened at the sight of me, this version of me he hadn't realized existed. "Mom," he whispered, "you look different." I stepped toward him slowly, my boots crunching on the snow. I finally feel like myself. The wind blew softly, carrying the faint sound of church bells echoing across the square. Ethan's breath shook. He opened his mouth, tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, he took one staggering step forward and sank into my arms, head pressed against my shoulder. He hadn't done that since he was a boy. I held him, steady but not apologetic, loving but not shrinking. I didn't rush to comfort him in the old way. I didn't say, "It's all right," or "Don't cry," or "I understand." I simply held my son while the snow fell around us, letting him feel the weight of what silence between us had cost. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Mom, I was wrong. I should have called. I should have asked you first. I shouldn't have let—" His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." "We'll sort it out," I said gently, "but not here, not in the cold, and not in a rush." He nodded, wiping his face. Adrian stepped forward slightly. Ethan looked at him, really looked, and something flickered across his expression. Not jealousy, not shock, but recognition that I wasn't lonely anymore. "You must be Adrian," Ethan said quietly. Adrian gave a polite nod. "And you must be Ethan." There was no tension, just two men acknowledging the space they each held in my life. Snowflakes drifted onto Ethan's hair. I brushed one gently aside, the gesture simple, yet full of all the years I had tried to love him without smothering him. "Come on," I said. "You should warm up." He nodded again, voice soft. "Mom, thank you for answering. I didn't deserve it." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I simply slipped my hand into my coat pocket, my fingers closing around the silver compass, Henry's compass, and felt the quiet steadiness I had carried across oceans. My journey wasn't over, and neither was Ethan's. Snow fell in slow, steady curtains as we pulled into the driveway of my old Vermont home. The first snow of the new year coated the roof, the pine trees, the porch steps, everything brushed in white, like the whole world had been reset. Ethan stepped out first, shoulders tense but posture steady. Adrian followed quietly behind me, respectful, present, but never imposing. I took one long breath of the cold air. It felt sharp and clean in my lungs. Inside the house, the lights were on, warm, yellow, familiar. Nothing about this moment felt familiar. Ethan opened the door before I could knock, but Brooke beat him to it. She yanked the door open with wide, frantic eyes. She froze. Her gaze shot from my face, to my coat dusted with snow, to the suitcase in my hand, then to Ethan standing beside me, and then, slowly, dreadfully, to Adrian, who stood one step behind, his presence calm and unthreatening, but unavoidable. 3 reasons to panic. They all hit her at once. Her mouth fell open. "Clara? You're home?" I stepped forward, not aggressive, not apologetic, just steady. "Yes, Brooke, I'm home." Behind her, Vivian sat at the kitchen table, back straight, hands wrapped around a mug she clearly wasn't drinking from. Her expression hovered somewhere between polite hostess and a woman bracing to lose control of a narrative she'd been winning for years. For a few seconds, no one spoke, just the hum of the heater, the soft hiss of falling snow outside, a frozen tableau of a family mid-fracture. Then Brooke snapped. She burst into tears, loud, messy, unrestrained tears. "You ruined everything," she cried, voice shaking. "You ruined Christmas. You froze our account and you," her voice cracked, "you posted that picture with that man." Adrian shifted subtly, as if wanting to step away to give us more space, but I lifted a hand gently. "Stay," I murmured. He stayed. Brooke wiped her nose with the sleeve of her sweater, gasping. "Everyone saw it. My friends, my family. You humiliated us, humiliated me, just to prove some point. I took one step inside, snow melting onto the rug. Ethan closed the door behind us. I stood tall, calm, my voice level even. Brooke, I froze what I built, not what you earned. The sentence hung in the air like a bell toll. Brooke sagged into the nearest chair, trembling. I didn't want, she swallowed, I didn't want to be compared to you again. Vivian glanced sharply at her daughter. Brooke. No, Brooke said, voice breaking. I have lived my entire life being compared to cousins, to neighbors, to you. She pointed weakly toward Vivian, and then to Clara, always Clara. Perfect Clara, kind Clara, competent Clara, Clara who never raises her voice, Clara who everyone loves. Her shoulders collapsed inward. I couldn't be her. I couldn't even be close. Ethan looked at her. Not angry now, but seeing her clearly for the first time. Seeing the insecurity, the fear, the frantic need to protect something inside herself that had cracked long before I entered the picture. Vivian set her mug down gently. Brooke, she said quietly, she never competed with you. You competed with yourself. Brooke looked at her mother, betrayed and stunned. Mom, how could you? Vivian exhaled slowly. Because it's time you heard it. I compared you to people your whole life because I thought it would make you strong. Instead, it made you scared, and you passed that fear on to Clara. Silence fell heavy. Ethan looked between the two women he cared about most. For the first time, he could see the truth behind the hurt. Brooke's cruelty had been misplaced pain, fear disguised as control. But that didn't erase what she'd done. I took another step forward, setting my travel journal on the kitchen table. The leather cover, worn smooth by Henry's hands and mine, lay open. Adrian, quietly respectful, stayed near the doorway. Brooke glanced at the journal as if it were a weapon. You went to Europe without telling us. I didn't need your permission, I said gently. I needed my freedom. Brooke shook her head, hair falling into her face. You pushed me away. No, I replied, voice steady. You didn't push me away, Brooke. You pushed yourself away from kindness. Her head lifted, eyes swollen, bewildered. She wasn't expecting that. It wasn't an accusation. It was a mirror. Vivian covered her mouth, tears welling. She turned toward me. Clara, I judged you without knowing you, and I taught my daughter the same bad habit. Her voice trembled. I am deeply sorry. The apology felt real, heavy, earned. I nodded once, a soft acknowledgement, not forgiveness yet, but a door opening. Brooke stared at the silver compass in my hand, the one catching the golden kitchen light, reflecting onto the wall like a small moon. She watched it tremble slightly between my fingers. What happens now? She whispered. Ethan stepped closer to me, standing fully at my side for the first time in years. Brooke noticed the shift and flinched. Vivian noticed too, and closed her eyes, grieving silently for the consequences of all the comparisons she'd sown into her daughter's life. What happens now, I said softly, is that we stop pretending. I looked directly at Brooke. At Christmas, you told me to stay home. Now I'm telling you this. I won't shrink myself to keep the peace in this house. Not anymore. Brooke's breath hitched. I didn't mean... I know, I said gently. Fear makes good people forget how to be kind. Adrian stepped back into view, not imposing, simply present. Ethan looked at him with cautious curiosity but did not move away from me. For the first time, Brooke saw the full picture. Me choosing myself. Me standing tall. Me not broken. And it broke her open. She collapsed into her hands, sobbing. Not from guilt, not from apology, but from fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing family. Fear of facing herself. I placed the compass on the table. Its silver reflected upward, landing on her face. We'll talk about the trust, I said quietly, but not today. Not like this. She nodded, tiny, wounded, a child inside a grown woman's body. Outside, snow drifted gently past the window. Inside, the kitchen was full of warm light and long shadows. My shadow tall against the wall, no longer small, no longer shrinking. It was the first time in years I felt like the woman Henry always believed I was. The house smelled like pecan pie again, warm, sweet, buttery. The scent drifted through the kitchen like a memory brushing against every corner of the home. I slid the pie into the oven and closed the door gently. The soft click echoed through the quiet room, settling the air the way a punctuation mark settles a sentence. "Sit," I said quietly. Ethan pulled out a chair for me before lowering himself into another. Brooke sat stiffly at the far end of the table, wringing a napkin between her hands. Vivian took the seat beside her daughter, shoulders straight but eyes softer than I had ever seen them. Adrian leaned casually against the doorway, arms folded loosely, present, supportive, but giving the family space. The only sounds were the ticking clock and the low hum of the oven. Ethan broke first. He stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "Mom, I need to say something." I met his eyes. They were red-rimmed, exhausted but clear. "I didn't just leave you behind," he said, voice trembling. "I left myself behind too. I believed what was easiest to believe. I didn't ask. I didn't look closer. I didn't protect you." His breath shook. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I rose slowly and placed my hands on his shoulders. "You didn't lose me," I said softly. "You only lost your way." His face crumpled, and he pulled me into a hug, tight, fierce, heartbreaking in its sincerity. Brooke was crying quietly now, tears slipping down her cheeks. She wiped them with the napkin she'd nearly shredded in her hands. "Clara," she whispered, voice cracking. May I say something too?" I nodded and sat. She moved her chair closer, just an inch, but enough. Her voice trembled. "I compared myself to you all the time, and when I felt small, I punished you for it." She swallowed hard. "I thought you'd judge me the way my mom always did. I thought you'd see every flaw. I thought you'd think less of me." Vivian inhaled sharply. "Brooke, that was me, not Clara." Brooke shut her eyes tight, shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry for the Christmas lie, for the words at the party, for pushing you out because I was terrified of never being enough." I reached across the table and rested my fingertips lightly on her hand. Fear can make good people forget how to be kind. Her tears fell freely, not because she was being accused, because she was being understood. Vivian pressed a hand to her lips, her eyes shining. "Clara, I judged you without ever taking a moment to know you, and I taught my daughter to do the same." She steadied her voice. "I'm sorry." I nodded gently. "Thank you." A soft knock sounded near the doorway. Adrian approached with something in his hands, a small velvet box. He set it on the table near me. "This belonged to my wife," he said quietly. I looked at him, surprised. He opened the box to reveal a delicate snowflake brooch, silver, intricate, sparkling faintly under the kitchen lights. "She wore it every winter," Adrian continued. "I'd like you to have it. She would have liked you. You two carried the same quiet strength." Brooke let out a soft, broken gasp, the kind of sound that comes from witnessing something pure when your heart is raw. She covered her mouth and bowed her head, sobbing silently. The oven ticked softly as heat wrapped the air in gentle warmth. Finally, Ethan asked, "Mom, the trust, the money, why did you freeze it?" Everyone froze. Even the air seemed to still. I leaned back slightly, letting the truth settle before speaking. "I didn't freeze it out of revenge," I said. "I didn't freeze it to punish anyone." I looked around the room, at my son, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had raised her, the man who had walked beside me on foreign streets. I froze it until the home becomes a kind place again. Silence, the deep, honest kind. Vivian exhaled a single word, quiet but clear. Fair. Ethan nodded slowly. Respect, understanding, remorse, blending behind his eyes. Brooke wiped her cheeks with trembling hands. She wasn't angry. She wasn't panicked. She was humbled. "Clara," she whispered, "I want to earn that kindness back. I do. I will." I reached for the travel journal resting near the center of the table, the one Henry had filled with memories and scribbled hopes. I opened it to a familiar page, tracing his handwriting with my thumb. "Kindness is the only home we never lose," I read aloud. Ethan closed his eyes as if the sentence hit a place deep inside him. Brooke's breath hitched. Vivian nodded as if realizing, maybe for the first time, what real home meant. Adrian, still leaning against the wall, gave me a look, steady, warm, quietly proud. The pie timer dinged. The sound was gentle, almost musical. I stood and opened the oven. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of pecans and brown sugar, smell of family, of healing, of things made slowly and carefully. I set the pie on the table, steam rising in soft curls. "Let's start again," I said, voice calm and full, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we could. Snow drifted softly across the Merritt house, settling on the roof like powdered sugar. Warm lights glowed through every window, and wreaths hung on the doors, tied with deep red ribbons. The house, once silent and heavy with unspoken tension, now hummed with laughter, clinking dishes, and the kind of peace that arrives only after a storm has passed. It was Christmas, 1 year later. I stood at the kitchen counter, lighting a row of candles along the window. Their flames flickered gently, casting warm halos across the room. Behind me, the sound of boots stomping lightly on the porch made me smile. Brooke entered first, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes bright, arms full of gifts wrapped in silver paper. She hesitated only a second before stepping forward and wrapping me in a hug, tight, sincere, unguarded. "Merry Christmas, Clara," she whispered. I hugged her back, feeling the difference, the openness, the softness, the absence of fear. Vivian followed behind her, carrying a tin wrapped in plaid cloth. "I brought something I baked," she said, cheeks pink. "It won't compare to yours, but I wanted to try." Her tone wasn't competitive. It was warm. I smiled. "Thank you, Vivian. I'm glad you're here." In the living room, Jonah and Lily were dancing around Adrian, who pretended to be baffled by the rules of a board game they were teaching him. He held the instruction sheet upside down intentionally, which sent the children into fits of giggles. Adrian winked at me over their heads, the kind of quiet wink only someone who had grown to know you would give. Ethan walked in from the hallway holding a tray of cider mugs. He set them down, then looked around the room slowly. His wife laughing with his mother, his children shrieking with joy, his home no longer a minefield of comparisons and apologies. He caught my eye and smiled, full, genuine, proud. "Mom," he said softly, "you did this." "No," I said gently. "We all did." Brooke came to stand beside Ethan. I reached into the cabinet above the fireplace and pulled down a small wooden box, one Henry had carved years ago. Inside it lay a thick cream envelope sealed with gold wax. I handed it to Brooke and Ethan. They exchanged a glance before opening it. Their eyes scanned the page inside. Terms, signatures, a clear declaration from the trustee. "The $5 trust," I said, "is no longer frozen." Brooke pressed a hand to her chest, breath catching. "Clara." I raised a hand gently. "But remember, Henry built it for a kind home, not a divided one." Brooke's eyes filled instantly. She covered her mouth as a sob escaped. Not of guilt this time, but relief, gratitude, release. She reached for Ethan's hand, gripping it tightly. "You have my word," she whispered. "This home will stay kind." Vivian sniffed softly and placed a hand on her daughter's back. For once, instead of pushing Brooke forward with pressure, she simply supported her with presence. A moment later, Adrian stepped into the glow of the living room, carrying a small box wrapped in deep blue paper. He offered it to me with both hands. "What's this?" I asked, smiling. "Something my wife wanted passed on when the moment felt right," he said. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a silver chain, simple, beautiful, meant to hold the compass Henry gave me decades ago. Adrian's voice was soft. "Some journeys should be walked with someone by your side." The chain glimmered in the candlelight. My breath trembled. I touched the compass at my apron pocket, feeling its familiar weight, then slipped it onto the chain. Adrian helped clasp it around my neck. For the first time, the compass wasn't just a memory, it was a direction forward. Ethan raised his mug of cider. "I want to make a toast," he said, voice steady. Everyone gathered in a loose circle. Brooke tucked close to him, Vivian beside her, Adrian standing slightly behind my shoulder, a steady presence. "To Mom," Ethan began, eyes shining, "for showing us that happiness isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose." I felt tears gather, but warm ones, light ones, not heavy the way they used to be. We clinked our mugs gently. Later, after dinner, after pie, after laughter, I stepped out onto the porch. Snow was falling again, soft flakes twirling in the glow of the house lights. I opened my travel journal, its pages already filled with memories of Prague, Budapest, Vienna, Zurich, scribbles of moments that had rebuilt me, piece by piece. Tonight, I wrote a new line. When life tells you to stay home, go find your own adventure. Inside, the family gathered around the tree, Ethan lifting Jonah so he could place the star, Brooke handing Vivian ornaments, Adrian kneeling on the floor helping Lily fix a broken ribbon. I lifted my phone, took a picture of them, my family, whole again, and posted it. Caption: I celebrated Christmas this year by celebrating myself. As I stepped back inside, the bells from the church across the hill began to ring, soft, steady, hopeful. Exactly the way this new chapter of life sounded.